Hello and welcome to Legalbytes. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we explain the law one bite at a time. We don't give legal advice, but we do talk about how the law works and try to look into our crystal ball to see how things might turn out. If you're enjoying this on YouTube, we'd love it if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends, all the great YouTube-y stuff. And if you want to listen while out and about, we're now offering our live streams in podcast form where you can leave a rating and review. Links are in the description below, as well as to our clips channel where you can find some of the best clips taken from our live streams. Otherwise, if you want to catch me elsewhere, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so on Locals, Patreon, or by becoming a YouTube member, or by buying some really awesome Legalbytes merch. Again, all links are in the description below. And with that said, let's get into it. All right. Happy Thursday, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world watching this from. I hope you're having a great day, a great Thursday, a great week so far. And we're headed almost into the weekend. Thursdays, I always feel like they come by so quickly because I don't know, for whatever reason, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're almost to the weekend. That's crazy. So I hope you guys are doing well, and let's say hello to the chat before we get going. Krista S says, hi, all grainy day here in France. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. But then it's a perfect opportunity for some coffee, some tea, some hot cocoa, maybe a cozy sweater. I don't know, but I hope you're staying dry nonetheless. Mary M, greetings from Munich. Marissa says, hi, everyone. Sultan Sheikh says, hey, dudes. Robbie Dobby, good morning. How is everyone today? Doing well. I hope you're doing well. Shireen's got some hearts in the chat. Daniel Erb says, morning, everyone. Has 01 says, good morning / afternoon, everyone. Almost the weekend. I'm off tomorrow, so today is my Friday. Yay, good. Happy for you. Aaron H says, good morning from Orlando, dear friends. Jenner G says, love, got some hearts. Good morning from Sicklerville, New Jersey. And then we've got, let's see, let's go back over here because I always try to save however many I can during the intro or right before we go live. And let's see here. Oh, we've got Kelly Dawson from Ohio. Good morning. Good morning. Then we've got Family Man Danny says, Legalbytes, good morning to you and all of the chat from Michigan. Good vibes to all. Good vibes. Absolutely. Kelly Marie says, hi, Alita. Hi, Kelly. I hope you're doing well. Cheryl M says, hello. Sandra Ramirez, good morning from a sunny Savannah. Ooh, I'm so glad you got some sunshine there. Sonia, Sonisa Orr says, good morning from New Jersey. Hope you're well, and thank you for all your coverage. Of course. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Let's see. We've got Arto Rissanen again. Let's get into it. I did pop into Sweden for a bit today, but back in Finland and ready to derail the stream. Awesome. Always looking forward to it. Oh, we've got Ruta P from Lithuania. Labas iš Rudeniškos Lietuvos, which means hello from a fall-ish Lithuania. Laba diena. I hope you're doing well, Ruta. Okay, we've got Kiwi Twist Gaming from Florida. Love it. Hello. I hope you're doing well back there. Joanna, greetings from Norway. Oh, we've also got, I skipped over this one. Rabbit. Hello, everyone. Doing great today. I caught the black snake in my house. Oh my gosh. That is terrifying. I'm I'm glad to hear that turned out well. I hope it wasn't poisonous, and I hope that nobody got injured along the way. But I don't like snakes. This is another reason why I guess I love Indiana Jones is because I feel a kinship with him over his terror with snakes. I don't like them, so I'm glad that turned out well for you. Krista S got the coffee and stole hubby's sweater. Perfect. Now you're ready for a good rainy day. One blessed Nana says, watching from Kentucky and happy that tomorrow is Friday. Yes, absolutely. Me too. Calamity Jane says, hey, beautiful people. Very wet UK, but nothing new. Very nice. Gemma Pint says, hey, from Scotland. Sanit says, hi from Pretoria, South Africa. Oh, I love it. Love to hear about it. Has 01. The snow is here to stay in Alberta, Canada. It's a little chilly. Yeah, I would think that's just a smidge, right? Just a little bit chilly. Jessica, good morning from New Jersey, fam. Good morning to you as well. Joanna Knott, hello from Maine. Got my coffee. Love it. I love to hear it. We've also got Mary Malarkey. Happy Thursday from Chicago. Happy Thursday to you as well. Monica Korpinen. Good afternoon from a cold Sweden. No snow yet. Well, I guess it's probably around the corner though. I would not be surprised to hear it. And we'll get just a couple more. Nanine, good morning, everyone. Good morning to you as well. And we've got Natalie Ball from Quebec, Canada. Good morning. Alrighty. Oh, and one more. Joanne Cranberg. Hi from Wisconsin. Have been missing you. Aw. Well, I'm glad that you're here, and I hope you enjoyed today's stream. So, as always, we are talking about some heavy topics here, right? I mean, of course, right? The title, the thumbnail. We're talking about Harvey Weinstein. We're talking about Danny Masterson. Both of these individuals are defendants in criminal cases where they have been alleged to have done some pretty horrible things. So there's a lot of that. We are going to have a little opportunity for a little bit of levity in one of these, and you'll see what I mean when we get to it. But I try to introduce at least a little bit to so it's not too heavy of a stream, because I know that when we're talking about this stuff, I know that we've got a lot of viewers that are DV survivors, are SA survivors as well. So I know that these topics can be very, very triggering. So, whatever we can do to sort of lighten things in an appropriate way. I definitely want to take the opportunity to do that when we can. So, but yeah, we've got some trial updates for both of these. It might end up being a little bit of a shorter stream. I don't know. It depends, because we've got one day of trial to talk about in the Masterson case, because as I said, on Tuesday, they were over a 4-day weekend break. So they didn't actually have any trial on Monday or Tuesday. So normally on Thursdays, we've got Thursday and Wednesday to cover for, the next trial day update. With Weinstein, we've got Tuesday and Wednesday, because of the fact that they were still they were in trial, and so they were moving forward with everything. So we've got a little bit more to talk about there, but we've got a couple articles on that, and we've got some interesting topics there. In the Weinstein case, we've got some discussion from or about some testimony from one expert witness who is a forensic psychologist, talking about she wanted to dispel some myths about R-ing circumstances. I know I always feel so silly, like censoring myself on these topics, but it's really just because I feel like I need to say this every time, but it really is just because of the fact that the YouTube algorithm really does punish people who use certain buzz terms, right? And so we're already talking about sensitive topics anyway, and so to the extent that I can make this, I can sort of lower the rating on sensitivity to the extent that I can. I want to do so, and it's not to say that we are shying away from these topics. Obviously, we are confronting them head first. We are talking about some very, very interesting and sometimes salacious things that are coming out of this trial. If you saw the live stream from Tuesday, you know that what we were talking about was some descriptions of Harvey Weinstein's body, which was very strange. He had some kind of a surgery to correct something that had happened to him, and what was required of that was a very strange sort of result. So I'm not gonna go into further detail about that. But if you watched on Tuesday, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because it was let's just say it was bananas. We'll say that. So yeah. Anyway, so and today in the Masterson case, or what we're talking about today, this is from yesterday. We're talking about testimony from Jane Doe 2. So she has not testified yet before in this trial. Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 3, they have testified at this point. They have faced cross-examination, but apparently her Jane Doe 2's testimony came and went relatively quickly. So she she testified to her, in her direct examination, cross-examination went relatively quickly. So we'll watch and comment on one of Tony Ortega's videos. He does such a phenomenal job, right? I've talked about this before. Not only is he, and by the way, that just now the shaking was not an earthquake, that was Indy walking by. As usual, I feel like we can always like put a poll in the chat to be like, earthquake or Indy. It's one of those. It's generally speaking, it's like 99.9% of the time going to be Indy. So anyhow, I totally just got distracted by that. Going back to talking about Tony Ortega. So he does such a phenomenal job. He's in the courtroom with his laptop, basically like transcribing everything that happens in the courtroom. So we are able to, see all of the things that they talked about, including yesterday. Apparently, Leah Remini's tweets became a topic of discussion at the beginning of the day. We'll get into that as well. And so he does such a great job of that. And then he's got like a nice summary video that he posts like the next morning. So for us, by the time we start this live stream talking about it, we've got a really great summary to kind of start off with. So I think that what we'll do is here, we'll start with Weinstein. We'll go through a couple articles there, and then we will be able to then we will go into the video by Tony Ortega that kind of does his summary of how things went, and then I think that we'll go through some of the transcript here. Maybe not all of it, because some of it gets very gruesome. Like he says that it's probably the most difficult testimony that they've listened to yet. So I know that there's been quite a few difficult accusations already that have come out, and a lot of difficult details, I should say, that came out with those accusations. So I do want to be kind of sensitive to that. So okay, let's get started, shall we? Before we do that, but I want to make sure I kind of mentioned this earlier, but as always, trigger warning, right? The topics that we're going to get into are definitely going to be triggering for individuals that have been through situations like this. So if that is you, please do what you need to do to protect your emotional health, your mental health. There is absolutely no need to subject yourself to something that is that is going to be triggering something for you, that is going to cause you some sort of harm. And undoubtedly we're going to be getting into some stuff that is going to be difficult. In the Weinstein case, first we're talking about an expert witness, and then we're going to hear from a daughter of one of the alleged victims. So most likely that story is not going to be as maybe as triggering, possibly. I mean, I can't speak to, what people have been through and what exactly is triggering for an individual, right? That's a person by person kind of thing. But for the Masterson case, that might be a little bit of a different story. So I want to make sure that I get that out there ahead of time, so that we make that very clear that we are going to be, jumping into sensitive topics, as always. Or not always, but as is often the case, especially when we're talking about these cases. So, okay. All right. Now let's get into it. All right. So we're starting with Weinstein. Here is an article from Variety saying the title is "A Psychiatric Expert Tells Weinstein Jury That Our Victims' Memories Can Become Murky Years After Assault." And we know this, right? If you guys have been following this channel for a while, if you've been following the coverage of these kinds of topics as well, we've talked about this before, right? I've had Dr. Honda on the channel. I've had others on the channel. We've talked about Dr. Tracy. I've had them on the channel, and we've talked about memories and how they can change over time, and how traumatic memories can also change over time. And that the reason for that is because the mind has a way of trying to protect itself from harm, right? Kind of in the same way that when you lift weights over time, it kind of it has the effect of actually creating some tears in your skin and your hands, right? And so what happens is your body builds up calluses. The brain kind of does the same thing, just in a psychological way, right? So it creates these kind of boundaries for you so that you don't have to relive those traumatic memories all the time. And so this is a very, very natural thing to happen. But let's get into what she actually says and how this actually came about. The prosecution called on Dr. Barbara Ziv to testify about our myths in Harvey Weinstein's trial. Okay. Ours are not what we see on TV, Dr. Barbara Ziv told the jury during Harvey Weinstein's trial in Los Angeles when she was called by the prosecution on Tuesday to testify about our myths. In other words, debunking common held societal beliefs about R and SA. Most of the things people believe are not accurate or supported by facts, Ziv said, telling the jury that behaviors of our victims are, quote, counterintuitive, unquote. And this is an important thing for the prosecution to highlight, right? Because undoubtedly you are going to have jurors who are going to compare the way that they think that they might act or interact in a certain situation, and then they would compare that to what the alleged victim says that they did. So having an expert come in and explain this is not exactly like how you would expect this to play out isn't exactly how it actually plays out in real life. That's an important thing to have. Now, this is also going to be something that is going to be a battle of the experts. We talk about this quite a bit on this channel anytime we have a trial like this or any kind of a trial, right? Like Deputy Heard, we had a battle of the experts. This is anytime you start to get into an area of medicine or psychology, or you have some sort of an explanation that is necessary, where you kind of need to bring someone in who knows what they are talking about. That's not just like, I saw this and therefore that. Having a psychological explanation for why these things happen, you need experts. And so both sides are going to have experts that are going to be testifying to something slightly different. Which one is going to be more convincing is going to come down to, how they're framed by their direct examination, what kind of holes can be poked in by the cross-examiner, and ultimately, also how much the jury is paying attention. Because the problem with an expert witness is sometimes they can be kind of boring because they can be highly technical, right? So the jury might not even be listening to the details of the expert witness in the first place. Something like this sounds like this is an interesting conversation and an interesting sort of explanation to hear. So I would think, and especially if it's the beginning of the day, that this is something starting off for the jury. They might be fresh minded, so maybe they're able to hear this. But not being in the courtroom, of course, we can't say whether or not the jury is actually paying attention because we don't know. We can't see them, right? So anyhow, like I said, this is an important thing, and I would expect that the defense is going to bring on experts, basically testifying to the fault of someone's memories over time, right? To say that someone who claims that something happened to them, their memory can definitely be super bendy over time, and that can end up, showing that their memory is totally unreliable, especially after however many years or decades or what have you. This case, the Weinstein case, is not operating on quite as long of a timeline as the Masterson case is, and as the Kevin Spacey case was, for example. That was a big issue in that particular case as well. But you still have a period of time where things have allegedly happened. And so you have to account for the time and the effect the time has on someone's memory. So all of that is to basically come loop right around a long explanation to just say that we are likely to see a battle of the experts between an expert like this saying, hey, this is the behaviors that have that you would expect to happen in a situation like this are not exactly how things actually happen. And then on the other side, they are likely to bring in an expert who's going to give a different explanation for why these individuals are, taking time to come forward or what have you. Okay. Or at least what that says about their testimony, if that makes sense. Okay. Most of the things people believe are not accurate or supported by facts, Ziv said, telling the jury that behaviors of our victims are counterintuitive. Ziv is a forensic psychiatrist and licensed physician who specializes in all aspects of SA, assessing behaviors of both victims and perpetrators. Over the course of her decades-long medical career, she has worked with more than 1,000 victims of SA, but has no affiliation to the Weinstein case and has not worked with any of the Jane Does who allege they are victims of Weinstein's abuse. And so this sounds like this is someone who is maybe in a bit of a uh, uh, in a little bit of a Dr. Curry kind of role, right? Somebody who does treat people, has treated a ton of people, but just not any of the individuals that are involved in this particular case. So it's interesting because this is somebody who doesn't work exclusively with victims, right? This is somebody who also works with people, who are also perpetrators. So that someone like that can give a very interesting perspective. And of course, the way that we know all of this information about this person's background is because that is something that they go through while the expert is on the stand to sort of show their credentials, right? Because in order for them to be qualified as an expert, they have to be shown to be someone who is qualified to be an expert. Not just anyone can testify as to their opinion on something, right? Because they have to go through certain qualification measures. Okay. Ziv testified as an expert in Weinstein's first criminal trial in New York City in 2020, as well as Bill Cosby's 2018 sexual assault trial in Pennsylvania. So this is somebody who definitely has experience testifying in trials. And testifying in trials, it sounds like against Harvey Weinstein. It doesn't say which side she testified on in these cases, but it seems like the assumption here is that she testified on behalf of the prosecution. So this is someone who knows what they're doing in terms of testifying as an expert and has had the ability to have an impact in those cases, so to speak, because as everybody knows, Weinstein was convicted in 2020. Bill Cosby was convicted in 2018. Bill Cosby, of course, was then later released because of due process issues that came about. I know a lot of people are upset about that. If you're pissed, that's warranted. That's absolutely appropriate, but make sure it's directed at the prosecutors because that was where that mistake happened. Ziv was on the stand for hours. After her presentation to the jury, Weinstein's defense attorney, Alan Jackson, cross-examined Ziv at length, focusing on the difference between the legal and medical definitions of R and consent. You testified about R myths. Those are broad generalizations about conduct, Jackson said, to which Ziv replied, I came here to educate what the truth is about SA, which is a good response coming from an expert, right? And this is, you would expect an expert witness like this to be able to give some pushback to the framing of a question by whoever it is that's cross-examining them. Ziv was called on by the prosecution as an expert to bolster their case. It's expected that later in the trial, the defense will also call on a doctor or medical expert to weigh in on memory loss and other issues that would present the jury with a different perspective than Ziv's studies and psychiatric work. So, like I said, we're going to have probably a battle of the experts here. Memory is complicated, Ziv explained to jurors, and victims of SA hold on to memories of central trauma forever. But smaller details of the attack, such as the day, time, what their perpetrator was wearing, etc., could be lost over the years. And this is something that honestly makes these kinds of cases very complicated, right? Because you have somebody who is making an allegation of something very traumatic. So that means that you are likely to have these inconsistencies. And the question is, are those inconsistencies because of the impact of the trauma on the brain, or are those inconsistencies because they are not telling the truth? This is such a difficult question. It's such a difficult question, and the jury obviously has to grapple with that. So that's one of the ways that these cases just are so difficult. If people don't report promptly, they say they don't remember years later, Ziv said. It's not that they're lying. People try to give their best. They are trying to remember. And yeah, I mean, that sounds about correct. Ziv explained that while police sometimes use those, quote, memory problems, unquote, to say a victim is not credible, that is changing as the understanding of our victims has progressed in recent years. As part of her presentation, Ziv broke down our myths, telling the jury that most behaviors the general public would assume of our victims are untrue, according to psychiatrists who specialize in SA. Right. Ours often occur among people who know each other, despite most people believing assaults are usually by strangers have said. And this is my understanding as well. Is that most often this happens, when two people actually know each other. Most people are R'd by someone who is known to them, she told the jury. She explained that while stranger R's do occur, most SAs involve people who know each other in some capacity, unlike the representation commonly seen in television and film. And actually, if you do kind of step back and sort of think about it, it does make sense because a lot of these sort of fights happen. When I say fights, I mean the legal fights. They happen in situations that are very kind of gray areas, right? Where the question really kind of comes down to, consent was happening, it was revoked, and then after that point that the activity continued, therefore there's no consent for that activity. Um, this is kind of a murky area, right? Victims of SA do not resist their assailants, despite most people believing they would fight back, the psychiatrist told jurors. Most individuals do not resist, Ziv said. Even aggressive verbal shouting and screaming is not as common as we may think. This is counterintuitive. You'd think if you're being violated, you'd fight back, she added. The bottom line is that's not the case. And this is actually one reason why legal standards have actually changed over time. It used to be the case that was permissible, a permissible defense, right? Is an analysis of how much the alleged victim fought back, how aggressively they fought back. That if they didn't, then that's like an implicit sort of sign of consent, which is awful. I mean, especially considering the information, the data that's out there today about what actually happens in the vast majority of cases. So this is an important sort of education that the expert is giving. During cross-examination, Jackson asked Ziv if, quote, some do fight back. She responded, some, and then continued, do some women fight back? Sure. The myth is that it's common. Jackson then asked, some do scream and yell and holler. Ziv replied the same way, responding, some. And I while I understand that the cross-examiner, that the attorney they've got to find something to try to, find some kind of pushback, right? I mean, they do have the choice of not cross-examining at all, but when it comes to an expert witness, usually you want to do something to push back, right? Because an expert witness can be very, very powerful, right? They actually have the ability to be seen as an authority, and if you don't challenge them on certain points that they are making, that can be a severe weakness in your case. So I do understand them trying to highlight the case that some do fight back. Okay, sure, some yell and holler and scream and all this kind of stuff. Well, sure. um but at the same time, I don't know that that's going to really have that much of an impact, because it's very reasonable for this expert to say, well, of course, like there are individual cases where things can happen differently, because each circumstance is a little bit different, right? The fact pattern is a little bit different. Even if we are talking about that on average, these are usually people that know each other in this kind of a situation. Um, that even in those circumstances, you can have some divergences, right? Is that, like, is alcohol involved? Are drugs involved? Is it daytime? Is it nighttime? Is it at my house? Is it at your house? Is it, is it at some other location that's at, some friend's place? Like there are all kinds of ways that the analysis can sort of change based on the circumstances. So, and obviously personality differences can come into play as well. So, I think that this response by the expert is very reasonable to say, like, yeah, of course some do. That doesn't really change what she is saying about the average or, typically what happens in these kinds of cases. Ziv told jurors that SA victims do not typically report promptly, despite most people believing that they would go to the police if they were assaulted. SA is an underreported crime, Ziv said. Even when it is reported, it is prosecuted very rarely. And the reasons for that are there are a number of reasons for why it's rarely prosecuted, but part of that is because a lot of these things happen in a very sort of gray, nuanced kind of way. And so putting on the resources to actually prove a case, unfortunately, I hate saying it, but it's true that, where there's a little bit of a gray area, sometimes these things uh are simply not prosecuted because they don't know if they can win, if there's enough evidence for it. She explained that when victims do report an assault, it's often not to authorities, but perhaps to a friend or a family member, but never saying anything at all is also common. Ziv said there is a large percentage that never tell anyone in their life. The feeling of shame is a reason why many victims do not talk about their attack. As she said, but there are many reasons why victims don't speak up. It's a very difficult subject to discuss, the psychiatrist added. They fear the response, intrusion into their private life, fear of being categorized as promiscuous or a liar. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. And there's a lot of, we saw this with in this case, in the Weinstein case, Jane Doe 1 in this case, who was um a model who is based out of Italy. We don't know if she's actually Italian or if that's just where she's living, but she talked about the shame and the self guilt that she felt afterwards. She is Catholic. She went to confession to confess to a priest about the whole situation, even though if you are listening to her talk about it, that sounds like something like she has absolutely nothing to confess because she didn't actually do anything. She was victimized by someone else. Obviously, that is assuming that you take her testimony as believable, credible, all that kind of stuff, which, so far I haven't read anything that calls anything there into question, even through the cross-examination of her testimony. But and I can also understand that talking to someone about it sort of reopens a wound that is already there further. Like you've already been through something and you feel, if you feel a lot of shame, you feel a lot of guilt, you feel, just completely violated by that, then also inviting someone else to come in and examine that whole situation, like that can be a whole new level of vulnerability that I can understand. The problem with that is that it does unfortunately make these kinds of cases harder to prove because then people who aren't familiar with these kinds of situations become they start to ask questions, right? Ziv told the jury that the demeanor of a SA victim following an assault, whether it be happy or sad, does not indicate whether or not they have been assaulted. Behavior after SA is variable, she said. You cannot tell whether an individual has been SA'd based on the aftermath of their behavior. Victims of SA often have continued contact with their perpetrator after the attack, Ziv explained, noting that the common belief is that a victim of R would never see or talk up to their Rist ever again. She testified that most people do see their perpetrator again and might willingly continue to communicate with them for a variety of reasons. So that is difficult, right? You know, where someone is kind of like required to because they run in the same sort of circles, that makes sense. But if they willingly continue to communicate, that that is something that a jury sort of needs a little bit of explanation for, right? Because if you haven't been through a situation like that, it sounds like why would you do that? That doesn't make sense to the average person. People work in the same circle, she suggested, explaining that victims may not want peers to find out what happened. That makes sense too, because that can, like I said before, that can open up all kinds of questions about what happened, and is this person accusing because it actually happened, or are they accusing because they want to be treated as a victim? Like, people will often ask questions. It is a really humiliating experience to be SA'd by someone who is known to you. And that also makes sense. A reason victims of SA may speak to their perpetrator after is because they want to make sense of it or they want an apology. And that is what one of the other Jane Does in this case said, that she voluntarily sort of went up to Weinstein to seek him out, to demand an apology from him. And she said that she was so embarrassed because what happened instead is that he actually just violated her again. Very often, continued contact occurs because victims fear retaliation and collateral damage, Ziv said, especially when a perpetrator is in a position of power. When a perpetrator damages other aspects of your life, those things affect your trajectory forever. And that really nails right to a case, to this case right here, right? To this situation, because we are talking about it. It sounds like so far these Jane Does who have testified, who are the alleged victims here, are talking about how they work in Hollywood. And we're talking about Harvey Weinstein, who for many years was regarded as a sort of kingmaker, so to speak, right? You work with him, you just might end up getting an Oscar, you just might end up getting all kinds of awards. Your career can skyrocket. And so just deal with what you have to deal with, and then you can be everything can be gravy. This is like obviously the justification that people have sort of talked about, that a lot of people felt. Obviously doesn't make any of it okay. And I'm not saying that I am apologizing or being an apologist for that kind of behavior at all. Not at all. Okay. Ziv also told the jury that it is common for SA victims to have consensual sex with their attacker later on. And this is something that is actually quite surprising. A lot of times people feel like they are just damaged goods and nobody else is going to want them, so they begin to act like damaged goods. That I can understand. I will say, like, when you first hear about it, it's very surprising to think, like, why would you ever go back to them? But the reason why you wouldn't go back to them is because of a feeling of I don't know, like, how should I describe this? Like I would think it would be, through a feeling of self-respect, that you know that you didn't deserve that. You know that you didn't, you have a sense of that, right? And so where somebody has been completely mentally and emotionally destroyed by the experience, they might not have that sense anymore. That may have been taken away from them. So I can also understand that explanation for why someone would go back to them, even though when I initially hear about it, I think, like, that's crazy, right? Like why would someone do that? Why not just think logically about this, right? You avoid the person who has attacked you in the past. Don't ever go to them ever again. Stay far away from them. But if you feel like you are therefore kind of done, and who else would want you now, because you've been uh completely destroyed of all dignity and all respect and all this kind of stuff. No one would ever want anything from you in a good, loving, healthy way. So just go back to the person who has taken all of that from you, and maybe they'll give you something that you can sort of hold on to in some weird way. Um so yeah, it's that is an absolute tragedy to hear that some people go through that and end up going back for just more treatment, because that that's going to result in more damage, more trauma. Awful, awful. Jackson challenged Ziv, asking, "Some do avoid their attack at all costs." Yes, she responded. And when he asked, "Some do go to the police immediately," she responded, "Some," which makes sense, right? It's reasonable for it's reasonable for an expert in a case like this who's testifying at trial about their opinion on these kinds of matters to say, yeah, some do these things because that's reasonable, right? You're gonna have some people that are going to respond a little bit differently because humans are different on the individual level. Okay, let's get the next article. So that was Tuesday. Now let's talk about Wednesday. I think it's this one. Okay, yes. Harvey Weinstein trial. This is another article from Variety. So it says Harvey Weinstein trial. Jane Doe's daughter testifies about witnessing mother's encounter with Weinstein. The daughter of Jane Doe number 1 was with her mother when she encountered Weinstein at a film festival. Okay. So, and this article will get into more details about it too. But Jane Doe number 1 is the one that I referenced a little bit earlier, the one who's based in Italy, who said that she was here for a film fest here. I'm in LA. I'm not in LA, but I say here because that the trial is happening in LA as well. So she says that she was in Los Angeles for a film festival. She had met Harvey Weinstein earlier that evening, just met him for the first time relatively briefly, and he then shows up unannounced at her hotel, sort of like demanding demanding an audience with her, essentially, and then all the horrible things happened. Okay, when Jane Doe number 1 took the stand last week at Harvey Weinstein's Los Angeles R trial, she testified that she was compelled to report her assault when her teenage daughter convinced her to speak up. Jane Doe number 1, who was the first witness to testify in the sprawling trial, alleged that Weinstein forced her to perform certain acts on him and then AR'd her in 2013 when she was visiting LA on a business trip for the Los Angeles Italia Film Festival. Jane Doe number 1 is a European model and actor who was based in Italy at the time she claimed Weinstein assaulted her. During her testimony, she said Weinstein, who was essentially a stranger at the time of the 2013 incident, showed up to her hotel room unannounced, forced his way into her room, and then SA'd her. He forced me to do what he asked, she testified. I was crying. During her emotional 3-day testimony, Jane Doe number 1 said that when she was back at the same film festival a few years later in 2017, she spotted Weinstein at an event. Yeah, and if you guys have been following our coverage of this case, you probably remember this as well, how she says that she wasn't expecting to see him there. He was like sitting at a nearby table. She froze. She was terrified. It was like a fight or flight mode, right? That she just like completely froze. She had brought her then teenage daughter to accompany her to LA to attend the festival, and her daughter noticed her mother's demeanor suddenly change when Weinstein was around. Not knowing anything about her mother's alleged assault, she didn't put the pieces together, but later on, Jane Doe number 1 told her daughter that she had been SA'd in the past. And so this also came out through Jane Doe 1 in her testimony as well. She says that she that she later told her daughter about it, and part of it was because of the fact that her daughter told her that she had been SA'd by a peer. And so Jane Doe number 1 said that that was the trigger for her to come forward um and to finally accuse him because had so much fear, so much shame um about uh about the whole incident, and so she was terrified of it. But having her daughter as not only as an example for her, but also feeling like she needed to be an example for hers, I think how it came about. She then decided to come forward, which is an important thing in this kind of a trial, because we're also talking about the Me Too movement, right? Because there's a question in any of these cases where the allegations came out around 2017, 2018, 2019, whether these things came out because they were legitimate or whether they came out because there was a sudden wind shift change, right? Because suddenly there were people who were getting a lot of attention from the public because they were coming forward with these these accusations against individuals. So, and it's obviously not to say, like, I feel like I need to say it, every time I sort of mention this. It's not to say that everyone who came forward at that time was lying about what they were alleging, right? Of course not. That's definitely not what we're saying. But there there is always a possibility that someone could be claiming something that didn't happen because they figure it could help their career at a time when there is a movement in place, where people are just being believed right off the bat, right? Amber Heard is obviously like the biggest example of that. So, that became very, very clear in the last year that her story on Johnny Depp abusing her during their marriage was completely false. Let me stop real quick for a super chat. Stuck on Strings, thanks so much for your super chats. It's a super supportive chat today. Just to put it out there, EMDR trauma therapy is life-changing. Truly changed my life. Not like traditional therapy. Works on reducing triggers, not discussing events. That is fantastic. Thank you so much for not only putting that out there in the chat, but also putting it out there in a super chat. I did see as I was starting to talk about this, that there are some folks in the chat that have been kind of struggling with this topic, as soon as I started to talk about it. And I'm so sorry that you guys are dealing with that. But I am so happy to see folks that are being supportive in the chat, folks that are helping to that are helping to give information and resources. So thank you so much, Stuck on Strings, for doing that as well. Really, really, really appreciate that. And that's one of the things that I absolutely love about this community, right? We talk about some really heavy stuff, some difficult stuff, but I love the fact that folks are, generally speaking, by and large, very supportive of one another and supportive of somebody coming in with a difference of opinion, right? And having respectful discussions on these kinds of things. So, okay, let's get back to it. Another layer of the story is that Jane Doe number one's daughter had also been SA'd at school. When the daughter told her mother about what happened to her, Jane Doe number one confessed that she had also been AR'd, so she could understand what her daughter was going through. The mother and daughter bonded over their shared trauma and made a pact with each other that they would both report their separate incidents to the police. And so this is one of the reasons why I think I mentioned this also when Jane Doe one's when we were kind of talking about Jane Doe one's testimony in this case earlier. I think I even said, like, I hope that they do have the daughter come to testify as well, because that is helpful for the jury to be able to evaluate, whether from her perspective, she corroborates what the mother said about the trigger for her to come forward and to accuse Weinstein here, right? To say that this was a very personal reason for why she came forward. It had nothing to do with this big movement that, that was going on at the time, or, or was about to go on at the time. Like this was a discussion that they had independently of everything else. And so it sounds to me like this discussion did happen before those public accusations were being made about Weinstein elsewhere. Roughly 1 week after Jane Doe number one's testimony, her daughter, who the court is identifying as Maria C. in order to protect her identity, was called on by the prosecution to corroborate her mother's account. Exactly. All of a sudden, during the conversation, my mom became very nervous, and I noticed that she started looking only in one direction of the room. After a few moments, she kept saying, "Let's go upstairs to where the dinner is. Let's go, let's go," Marie testified, recalling the night her mother ran into Weinstein at the Los Angeles Italia Film Festival in 2017. She said she noticed that in the direction her mother was staring, there was this man sitting and staring right at my mom and I without taking his gaze off. She confirmed that the man was Weinstein, and at the time, she had no idea who he was. Maria shared that Weinstein approached the table she was sitting at with her mother at a festival dinner. I again noticed my mom looking very, very nervous, but this time it wasn't wanting to leave. This time it was fear, she said. She froze. She froze right in the moment and just looked into blank space. When asked by prosecutor Deputy DA Paul Thompson why this moment stuck out in her mind, Maria said, "I recall this event particularly well because the same year, at the beginning of fall, I was told by my mom that she had been AR'd by this man." That is something that can definitely trigger a memory like that. I mean, if you had already kind of noticed that your mom was acting strangely in a certain situation, and then you noticed another individual that was catching her attention, that makes sense, for that to be something kind of weird, and then later on for something to sort of trigger that older memory, right? Not that old because it's the same year that happened. Later on in the fall, her mom explains to her what had happened. Um, that makes sense. This is a very reasonable explanation in my opinion. The conversation where Jane Doe told her daughter she'd been AR'd took place a few months after they had encountered Weinstein at the Italia Festival in 2017. Maria said her mother did not disclose the identity of her alleged perpetrator to her daughter at first, but later on, she eventually told her daughter it was Weinstein. "I was informed about who the man who AR'd her was at the beginning of the first few articles of the Me Too movement," Maria told the jury. She said when her mother revealed it was Weinstein, she Googled him, and when she saw his photo online, she realized it was the man her mother spotted and appeared to be fearful of at the festival. When Maria was cross-examined by Weinstein's attorney, Alan Jackson, he prodded her timeline of events, questioning if she changed details from her initial interviews with detectives in the case of 2018, such as how long Weinstein had stared at her mother, how she knew Weinstein was staring at her mother, and when her mother revealed Weinstein as her assailant. "Your story is changing," Jackson said. "That's not what you said in 2018. Now, I do wish that they gave a little bit more details um, about like what the exchange was before Jackson says your story is changing, right? Because that may be his characterization of it. The jury might see it a different way. So and again, on cross-examination, the witness is going to be put under some pressure here, right? Because that's the job of the attorney who is doing a cross-examination. They have to, right? Even if it makes you look like a little bit of an a-hole, obviously the goal in a case like this, especially where we're talking about some sensitivity here, where we're talking about a young woman who also has been SA'd herself, according to her testimony. Like this could be a very delicate witness in the eyes of the jury. So, or it could also be someone who is willing to say just about anything to bolster a family member's, her own mother's testimony. There's that possibility, right? Theoretically, there's that possibility. But, either way, it's the job of the defense attorney here to cross-examine and to sort of try to poke and prod and find some weaknesses in her testimony. So, to the extent that they can make her look like at least a little bit less of a credible witness, that is helpful for the defense. But, asking, how long Weinstein stared at her mother, how she knew Weinstein was staring at her mother, when her mother revealed Weinstein as her assailant. I don't know that any of those kind of details are going to be like, even if there is a difference between what Maria said in 2018 versus what Maria said today, or what was it, yesterday, about those specific details, that could be ticky tacky enough that the jury is just going to be like, okay, that was like 4 years ago now, and it's a distinction without a difference, as I like to say. "My testimony is the truth," Maria said on the stand. "I never changed my story." Jackson asked Maria about reporting her own SA to the police in September 2017 and questioned why her mother didn't speak to authorities about her alleged R at that same time when they were at the police station. Which I will say that is a legitimate question. Like if I'm somehow the defense attorney for Weinstein, I don't know. I don't know if I would accept a case like that because of how I feel about Weinstein. I've said before, I've got some bias in this particular case, trying to be fair even with that bias, but I feel like he probably did the things that he's that have been alleged of him. As I'm sure a lot of people do at this point. But that's a legitimate question, right? To ask. Now, of course, with what we just heard from the expert, the forensic psychologist talking about like, look, like this kind of stuff is not what you would typically expect. It's often very difficult for them to come forward to make an accusation, to, try to press charges, et cetera, et cetera. Like that is the kind of thing that was just addressed on the stand. But I don't fault the defense for trying to go there because that's their job. Maria, and then it says Maria had reported her incident before the Me Too movement exploded with Weinstein's exposés in October 2017, but her mother did not report her incident until shortly after those articles came out. I mean, but the thing is that this detail could be important here as well, because that could come back to rendering this cross-examination on this point ineffective, right? Because even if the mother, Jane Doe 1, if she came out after articles had already come out about Weinstein in October 2017, she then comes forward after that. The fact of the matter is that she apparently had this conversation with her daughter ahead of all of that. They had this conversation together, and the daughter acted in conformity with that promise that they both made to each other, right? So the expectation would be from the daughter that her mother would also come forward and would do the same thing, because the daughter had been brave. She wants her mom to be brave. That makes sense. Now, could she be lying about that part? Could she have made that up to sort of justify, what has happened, Um yeah, that could be the case, but that is for, like I said, and like I will say for all of these witnesses that we don't have the opportunity to see ourselves, that's up to the jury to evaluate, right? This is why they've got them in person in front of them, to be able to watch them as they are giving their direct testimony, as they are responding to the pressure under cross-examination. How well does their testimony stand in the face of cross-examination, in the face of the pressure by the defense? If it stands fairly well and she doesn't look like she's being a little weaselly, then this is a pretty damn good explanation for why Jane Doe 1 reported the incident at the time that she did. And this is in and I will say that this is in distinction with how I found Anthony Rapp's testimony to come across, right? We did the same thing in that case where we were reading through the articles because, again, we didn't have cameras in the courtroom. So, we were definitely relying on journalism, hopefully good journalism. Hopefully they're not leaving out important things. Hopefully they're not framing things in an improper way. But, reading through his explanations under cross-examination for why he came out when he did, and why like what the explanation was for his purported PTSD for when that showed up, versus the other things that he had seen and he had encountered. He had, watched a lot of movies of Kevin Spacey over the years, and yet suddenly in 2017, that was when his PTSD, suddenly he had PTSD from that. Like there were certain things in his timeline that didn't quite seem to land. And so his explanations for those things, and it could be that he was definitely telling the truth, right? It could be that is exactly how things happened. But the question is that believable to an objective person? And that's sometimes one of the very difficult things about these kind of cases, right? Getting teary, Maria said, I had the courage to speak out only because my mom promised me that she would go to the police about her alleged assault, which she eventually did in October 2017, about 4.5 years after Weinstein allegedly AR'd her. It is safe to say that you are extremely close, Jackson asked Maria about her relationship with a mother. You love her very, very much, Weinstein's attorney asked. You would do anything for her? Jackson asked Maria, who answered yes before her testimony concluded. Which, of course, I mean, the purpose of a defense attorney in asking that on cross-examination is to try to suggest that she would be willing to sort of fabricate her testimony, or she would be willing to stretch certain things, expand on certain things that aren't exactly accurate or real, to benefit her mom, right? Because she's obviously feels a lot of loyalty to her mom. She loves her mom. She wants her mom to do well. She doesn't want her mom to lose a case where she's, coming forward and accusing a very powerful person of doing some very heinous, horrible things. So the implication here is that, yeah, the defense attorney would definitely like for the jury to think of this witness as less credible because of the fact that she might have a bias for helping her mom. But to what extent does that stick is unclear, because we can't see her behavior and her like physical response to that question in the courtroom. But yeah. Anyhow, that is that. So we have now finished through the Harvey Weinstein update, and now we will come back to the Masterson case. And now we're back with Tony Ortega, who has been in the courtroom every single day, and he's got these lovely summaries with these updates on the case here. So we're going to go through this one, and I'm going to pause it and give comments and stuff on it to see if I can give some more color, some more nuance, some more commentary on this. But he's, like I've said before, he's doing a fantastic job of it. So, all right, yep. Let's get started.
Underground bunker. Your proprietor outside the courthouse Wednesday afternoon. You want news? I got news. A lot happened today after 4 long days off. Finally, we got back going, and it was a really interesting day. First off, China Phillips arrived with her sister Bijou. California preaching in the house.
And Bijou, of course, is Danny Masterson's wife, Bijou Phillips.
China is married to Billy Baldwin. Like I said, she's Bijou's sister. And the reason why I mention her YouTube vlog is she's an evangelical Christian, and the name of the vlog is California Preaching. And I check on it once in a while because she's a classic social media oversharer. And so she's actually, I think, inadvertently tipped me to some interesting stories because she can't help talking about her family. You might remember the time, for example, she went over to Bijou and Danny's house and interviewed Bijou about Danny. Talk about terrible timing.
Yeah.
Well, the guy's facing criminal charges. She asks her sister about him.
Yeah, I will say that's not the right time to do it. So, yeah.
And Bijou calls him a strong island type, meaning a very macho guy. Not the smartest thing to say when he's facing rape charges. Anyway, so I've enjoyed checking in on China's blog, and it was fun to see her in court today. And then she was joined a little later by Mackenzie. So all 3 sisters were sitting in the front row. And there was also Christopher and Alana. No Jordan today. So things got off to an interesting start. Before the jury even came in, defense attorney Karen Goldstein objected to Leah Remini's tweet storm.
Yeah.
From yesterday or the day before. I don't remember exactly when. Leah put up this like 36 tweet thread about the trial, about the things being revealed in it, that if that these poor women found that if you try to report somebody like Masterson, Scientology policies are that victims pulled it in, they face expulsion.
And when he says pulled it in, I've come to understand that that term means that someone has done something either in this life or in a past life to have brought misfortune upon themselves. It's sort of like a version of karma, so to speak, that you have done something in the past at some point, whether this life or a previous one, that is responsible for this unfortunate thing that has happened to you. And so that it's a very unfortunate sort of belief system when we are talking about people that are legitimately victimizing other individuals, and then they end up getting away with it because of power structures and things like that. So fun times.
All the stuff we've been learning about in the trial, but Leah put it so strongly. I mean, you got to see these tweets if you haven't.
Okay. So, and I'm going to pull up those tweets because I think it's interesting to go through them.
Really nailed it. So Karen Goldstein this morning was telling the judge, this might prevent Danny from having a fair trial. Leah tweeted. Oh!
Some of his reactions are pretty funny. Okay, so with that, let's I am going let's I'll pause it here and then I'll pull up the tweets because I think it's interesting to show what she tweeted. And it is kind of a long thread. So we'll go through it. Okay, so Leah Remini, of course, if you are familiar with Leah Remini, she is a former Scientologist. She is a very, very outspoken anti-Scientologist now, as seems like often is the case for people that leave Scientology. So she's got this very, very, very long thread of points about Scientology and about the Masterson case that is very interesting. And as you can see here, it has gotten quite a lot of attention. This first one here has 38,000 likes, 1,115 quote tweets. We've got all kinds of 8,289 retweets, and then a lot of comments as well. So, okay, I'll read through this because I think it's very interesting to go through it in case you are not on Twitter yourself. Okay. And so this is basically a series of points that she has numbered. So she says, 1, did you know that if you are a Scientologist, you are forbidden from contacting law enforcement when another Scientologist has committed a crime against you? If you do, you will be declared a suppressive person and lose your family, friends, and livelihood overnight. 2, I'm sharing this with you because there is a criminal trial going on right now that is not getting enough attention on social media. Actor and Scientologist Danny Masterson is on trial in Los Angeles on charges of R-ing multiple women. Well, I mean, we're covering it here, but I guess not too many others are for some reason. Point 3. First, let me explain how Scientologists are controlled. Scientology's policies, written by founder L. Ron Hubbard, can never be altered and must be interpreted literally, allowing this criminal org to control members and insulate itself from bad PR. 4. These policies govern every single part of a Scientologist's life. Every Scientologist follows Scientology policies to a T. There is no choice in Scientology, and you'll learn why in this thread. 5. Most of the women who have credibly accused Danny of R were Scientologists and reported their Rs to top ethics officials in Scientology and a few trusted friends. 6. Everything shared with these officials is always reported to Scientology's leader, David Miscavige. These women did this in the immediate aftermath of when they were R'd. 7. In Scientology, you are forbidden from ever reporting a fellow Scientologist to law enforcement, and you aren't allowed to sue Scientologists unless Scientology officials first approve it. I mean, and that sounds about correct from what we've learned in this case so far as well. One of the Jane Does talked about how she requested the ability to make public accusations against Danny Masterson, and then the response was, "You are allowed to sue him civilly, but don't you dare go to the police. Everything has to be done essentially in-house." And then when she did, the response was, "You're effed." 8. The reason for this Scientology law is simple. Scientology is a totalitarian cult, and like all totalitarian states, any justice is handled within. Scientology and Scientologists believe they are above the law outside of Scientology law. Now, like I said before, Leah Remini has been very outspoken against Scientology, and so she definitely doesn't mince her words here. 9. Scientologists refer to non-Scientologists as WOGs. The laws that non-Scientologists follow are known as WOG law. Again, Scientologists believe that WOG law is always beneath Scientology law. 10. As a Scientologist, you are taught that WOGs are ignorant, misinformed, or evil. There are fewer than 25,000 Scientologists worldwide, meaning Scientologists believe over 7 billion people are ignorant and misinformed, and that some of them, especially psychiatrists, are evil. 11. Scientologists believe that the body you're living in now is just a vessel and that we live innumerable lives. Therefore, they think they can protect their eternity by helping to protect Scientology. And let me take a quick break here. Sandra Ramirez, thanks so much for this very generous super chat. Says, if you are in the chat, need assistance, please contact RAIN Organization. They have a website with resources. You can chat with them online or call them. They provide confidential support. Oh, that is a fantastic idea. We need to get a link in the chat to that, and I will pin that. Let me see. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, thank you so much, Sandra, for putting that out there. That is absolutely a very important point, and I found it, so I will share that. And that is also going to be pinned. Done. Okay. And then if I can remember, I will try to put that in the description as well later on. Okay. All right. But absolutely, completely 100% echo what Sandra just said. Like if you have been through something, and you are struggling with it, there are resources out there. This is one of them. Please absolutely, absolutely take care of yourself and um seek the help that you need so that you can be a full, healthy, happy person. Again, it is possible for you to be happy and healthy again. If you are not right now, if you are having a hard time, it is absolutely worth it. It is worthwhile for you to go through that process to get to that place again, because you are someone who is a valuable person, who is a light in this world, and who can shine a light for other people who have been through similar experiences. So I absolutely love that you put that out there, Sandra. Thank you so much, and a wonderful, wonderful reminder. Okay. All right. And obviously, I think this link, RAIN organization, is only in the United States, but there are other organizations in other countries as well. If you are not from the United States, please, please, please do seek out these resources as well. Okay, let's get back to these tweets here. Okay, so now number 12 from Leah Remini. Scientology has a guiding dynamic, quote, the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics, unquote. Among those dynamics, Scientology is the most important dynamic to protect. Therefore, Scientologists will protect Scientology at all costs. 13. The policy permits Scientologists to do horrific things to protect Scientology and makes Scientologists unreliable witnesses. It allows Scientologists to reject WOG law and lie to law enforcement. It allows a Scientologist to commit perjury to protect Scientology, which I think I saw in her interview with Joe Rogan. I think she actually talked about that, how she said that there was a belief even that they would have to lie to law enforcement to protect the person that they were talking to. And I don't know if it was specifically about like these kinds of accusations or if it was to lie about questions about Scientology, like the core principles of Scientology that remain hidden except for the people like at the very top. Because she said something about like there was this belief that if you told them before they had gone through the process, there was this belief that they would end up like dying or something like that. Like you would end up like somehow causing some illness in them. So that's another thing. But there seem to be several um there seem to be several reasons for why they might lie to law enforcement. 14. So, what happens if you go to law enforcement about another Scientologist? Your life as you know it will be over. Scientologists who go against Scientology law and go to law enforcement are incredibly brave because they know the consequences are devastating. 15. You will be declared a subversive person, which means that no Scientologist in good standing can ever have anything to do with you again. You will be considered, quote, fair game, unquote. Scientologists will have permission to do whatever they have to do to destroy your life. 16. In an instant, you will lose your entire family, your job if you work for or with Scientologists, and your friends. You will lose everything because you dared to stand up for yourself and against Scientology, which this is, we were just talking about in the Weinstein case, that expert witness who testified about all of the reasons why someone might not come forward after being R'd, after going through SA. These are just your average psychological reasons for why that might not happen. Then on top of that, there is this layer of Scientology here, which Leah is talking about, and which has come up in the Masterson case as well, to say, like there's also this thing about Scientology that if you report to anyone, everything is over. You are not only excommunicated, but you are completely ostracized. You lose every single social connection that you have probably had over your entire life. Your family, your parents, your best friends, your children. Like these are so many things that are so important to a human being's mental and emotional health, that suddenly all of that is gone overnight is very, very, very difficult for somebody to live through. 17. Being declared a suppressive person, SP, and having Scientologists disconnect from you isn't a situation where some people will still keep you in their life. Scientologists live in a totalitarian state, so they follow orders strictly. You will lose everything and everyone. 18. For example, if you own a small business and are declared a suppressive person in the middle of the day, your employees will quit immediately. Your customers will immediately cancel their orders. Hey, that is terrifying. That is terrifying. 19. And how does Scientology ensure that Scientologists cut off all contact with someone who has been declared an SP? They accomplish this through an internal intelligence system which conducts interrogations and confessionals and monitors the behavior of every Scientologist. And this is also, again, if you guys have been following this case and following some of the videos that we've done on Scientology, just to sort of like explore this whole world, whatever we can, right? Because it is notoriously a closed society, a very private society. So oftentimes what we get is from people who have left it. But I remember, I think it was the Leah Remini interview with Joe Rogan again, where she was talking about how as you go through these auditing sessions, right, you have to talk about the things that you have done wrong. It's essentially like I'm coming from a Catholic perspective, going to confession, going to a priest, right, confessing your sins, so that you can sort of like clear all of that bad juju, right, and then you can go to communion, you can have all these various holy sacraments, because it's supposed to clear your conscience, and you're supposed to have some sense of penance. You're supposed to do something um to help what is it? So to equalize the sin, I guess, so to speak. But the difference with Scientology is that they document all of that. They document, and then they follow up. Like, are you still doing this? Are you still doing that? And like very, very personal things. So it's like they keep files on all of the sins that you have ever committed in your life, which can absolutely be held over you as blackmail. I remember my reaction to that was just like, that is horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. 20. If you're told that if you report an R to law enforcement, you will lose your parents, siblings, significant other, job, and all your friends, everything you've ever known, would that scare you enough that you might reconsider going to the police? And that's a very compelling question, I have to say. 21. Most people would be too frightened to move forward if the cost of reporting the R meant their entire life, from their family to their livelihood, would disappear overnight. 22. Another thing that stops Scientologists from coming forward with their allegations of SA and R is a key teaching, quote unquote, in Scientology that everything happens in your life is your fault. Scientologists will refer to this as pulling it in. 23. If you get rear-ended, you'll be asked, what did you do to pull that in? Everything is your fault because they never want anything to be blamed on Scientology. However, if something good happens to you, you aren't given credit. Scientology gets the credit. 24. Imagine you're a 14-year-old girl and a man has R'd you. When you share this news with Scientology, you're asked what you did wrong and, in some cases, made to make amends with your abuser. and you will not be allowed to report this crime to civil authorities. That's that's another level of awfulness, right? To then like you make an accusation, within Scientology because that's what you're supposed to do, and then the response to that is like we're gonna put you in front of the person that you are accusing and make you confront them, which is a whole nother level of trauma, right? We just talked about Jane Doe 1 in the Weinstein case, talking about when she inadvertently kind of like bumped into Weinstein again at this other event for 3 or 4 years later, and how traumatizing that was for her. So, if you then know that if you are going to make an accusation that that is what's coming for you, that is another reason to stay away, which makes sense. 25. And then the process of covering up the crime commences. This system is set up to cause paranoia and fear and encourage silence from its victims. 26. One of the survivors of Danny's predation, Jane Doe number 1, a former Scientologist, finally went to the police in 2004 after she reported that Danny had brutally AR'd her internally to Scientology's ethics department. She was threatened and ordered to remain silent. 27. After she told Julian Schwartz, David Miscavige's chief enforcer and a man who oversees the most sensitive cases in Scientology, including many celebrities, that she went to law enforcement, Jane Doe number 1 had her life systematically destroyed by Scientology. 28. In reaction to her telling him that she went to law enforcement about Danny brutally R-ing her, Julian Schwartz told Jane Doe number 1, "You're effed. You're totally effed." 29. Scientology officials also told Jane Doe number 1 and number 3 that they could never use the word R in internal Scientology reports when describing what Danny did to them. Hi. 30. One of the reasons I want everyone to pay attention to this trial is because Danny's defense attorney, Philip Cohen, is doing everything he can to strip the involvement of Scientology from this trial. And, I will say, trying to be objective in this case here, I can understand why the defense wants to do that, right? Because Scientology has a certain reputation. It has had a certain reputation for quite a while, and part of that is because of the efforts of Leah Remini, right? And not to say that like she's to blame for Scientology's reputation, because the things have been coming out of the Church of Scientology as an organization for decades, right? Long before Leah Remini ever came out and talked about the organization herself and her experiences and all of the things that she says were awful that she experienced. So there has been a certain reputation for a very long time. Um, so the more that Scientology is talked about in this case, the more that can potentially prejudice the jury against Danny Masterson. I understand that from a lawyer's perspective. At the same time, I also completely understand why, from the perspective of Leah Remini, why, from the perspective of the prosecution, why, from the perspective of the alleged victims here, why they want to be talking about Scientology, because it is contextual, right? They say that it is the reason why they didn't come forward. They say that it was the reason why they were sort of held in this weird captive sort of space, because they were like all of the normal barriers, like I said before, all of the normal barriers that someone who has gone through SA, who has gone through R, who has been victimized by these experiences, already has certain barriers to go to the police, to talk to people about their experiences, because there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of like self-guilt, there's a lot of issues that just come up just by the nature of the incident itself, right? That it of what it takes from a victim. On top of that, then there is Scientology, which is just another explanation for why these women didn't come forward. So I completely understand why Leah is saying this is so important to talk about, is to say that Scientology is a very big reason for why these women didn't come forward. And that's important because the jury is going to be evaluating the reason for their delay in talking to the police. So, okay. Continuing on with her list. 31, Scientology policies and the actions of Scientology's top officials should mean that Scientology should be a co-defendant in this trial. Everything that has happened in this case is largely due to Scientology's criminal policies. Although I mean, as an organization, that's a whole other can of worms to try to pull in an entire organization. Now, pulling in another individual from that organization as a co-defendant, that's another story. I mean, that's another analysis as well, but trying to pull in an entire organization is quite asking quite something. 32. Scientology has obstructed justice in covering up Danny's crimes, and his case is not the only time they've done this. Scientology has covered up at least hundreds of similar crimes involving sexual violence. The women Danny Ard should have shown an incredible level of courage. They went against everything they were brainwashed into believing and went to police. Their courage has not only meant that Danny gets held accountable, but they've exposed more criminality in Scientology. And I can understand why this is why she's being so loud about this particular case, is to say this is an example of what systematically happens in this organization. 34. These women have spoken out in great danger to themselves and their families. Since they went to law enforcement and went public with their stories, they've been harassed by Scientology PIs relentlessly, funded with tax-exempt funds. And the tax-exempt funds part is, of course, a reference to the fact that the Church of Scientology is treated as a religious organization, even though that is disputed by very many people in the public, right? Not every country treats it like that. We've gone over that on this channel as well. You know, Germany treats it as a cult, and so therefore it goes against their constitution. The UK treats it like a religion, but France, I think, does not. You know, the United States does give it tax exempt status, and so with that, that's a significant savings on their income. So there's a lot, and so that's why sometimes people will criticize me in the comments of these videos when I'm talking about Scientology, when I refer to them as the Church of Scientology. Again, the reason why I do that is because that is their official legal name. And so it's not me giving a judgment by saying, yes, this is a religion. I am learning about Scientology through this whole process myself. So, you know, I am not making any sort of conclusions on like, is this a religion? Is it not? I mean, it certainly looks very, very culty, right? The more I learn about it, the more it does look a lot like a cult, right? If it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So this is, you know, the more I dig into this, the more it really does look that way. And so so anyway, but that's what she's getting out there with the tax exempt funds. But and the point that she's referring to is about them being harassed by Scientology PIs, private investigators. She's talking about them getting harassed, getting followed, their dogs getting killed or their pets getting killed. There is a civil case that is following this criminal case by 3 of the alleged victims, as well as a husband of one of them, for these claims. So that one is also going to be interesting to follow as well. 35. If you care about combating Scientology, if you're frustrated that Scientology has never been truly held accountable for its crimes, please pay attention to this trial, tweet about it, and post on all your socials about it. 36. And while some media outlets have covered this trial, it's time for more reporters to give it the attention it deserves. It's not just about a Hollywood celebrity. It's about what a multi-billion-dollar cult does to cover up horrifying sex crimes. Whew. Yeah. So, like Tony Ortega said, she's not pulling any punches, right? She's very clear. Excuse me. She's very clear about what it is that she's saying and what it is that she means here. Okay. Anyway, so he referred to those tweets. Those are the tweets. Let's go back to his video talking about what happened yesterday at trial. So just to pull everybody back to where we were in the video, he said that the defense attorney Goldstein, I think her last name was. Let me just see here. Yeah, Karen Goldstein is the defense attorney there that spoke up. That she basically objected and said, you know, because Leah Remini has this series of tweets out there in the ether, we don't think that Danny Masterson is going to have a fair trial. Which is kind of funny to hear the argument made, especially after watching the Depp trial, right? But like how much was out there on social media about that case. like an argument could be made. I don't think it would be successful even in that situation about the impact that would actually have on the case, right? Because unless unless the jurors or the judge are then going on to social media to watch everything that's happening on social media, there's no impact, right? Because it's a bunch of people shouting in a room where the jury and the judge are not. So the judge is making decisions and the jury is making decisions. And so if none of them hear the tree falling in the woods, has the tree really fallen or has the tree really made a sound? That's kind of what we're getting at here. And so, I don't fault her for making the objection and putting it wanting it on the record, because that's her job. She's supposed to defend her case as vigorously as possible. But it's not a winning argument. It's not a winning objection, in my opinion.
Well, when Mueller got a chance to respond,
The
he said,
prosecutor is Mueller.
I haven't seen it. And as far as he was concerned, lots of people are covering the trial and there's plenty of podcasts about it. It doesn't affect us here. And then the judge agreed, saying that, she's not checking Leah's feed. She's just ruling by law. And I have a feeling that if it was Cohen bringing this up, he would have moved for a mistrial. But
And the reason why he says that is because Cohen has requested a mistrial like 3 or 4 times at this point, over all kinds of things. And again, I don't fault him for doing it, right? Because that is his job. He's got to vigorously advocate for his client. But if they're not winning arguments, it's easy from an objective perspective to kind of roll your eyes and be like, all right, come on, like you're really making this argument. But I can see it from the other side as well.
Judge Olmedo just said, you can lodge a complaint, that's fine. And Karen Goldstein said, thank you, Your Honor. And that was it. But it was just, one of the things we've been talking about is Danny's previous defense team. There's no question they were taking directions from David Miscavige and the Church of Scientology. It kind of messed things up. And so Cohen and Goldstein have made point numerous times that they're not doing that. They want Scientology out of it. They're trying to give the impression that they're not taking any direction from the Church of Scientology. But what about today? I mean, I asked another journalist about it, and he said, what about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard? Think about how much media was going on then. Think about how many tweets and YouTube videos.
Yep.
Didn't have a problem.
None.
And Leah Remini puts out some tweets, and it won't give Danny Masterson a fair trial?
Right.
That might suggest that these attorneys are still hearing from David Miscavige, who's, throwing a temper tantrum or something. I don't know.
That's interesting. And
I don't know.
So that's an interesting point, right? Because David Miscavige, who is L. Ron Hubbard was the founder of Scientology, but David Miscavige took over, I guess, when L. Ron Hubbard passed away. So he's effectively the leader of Scientology. And so it sounds like, or I wasn't aware of this, before Tony said this, but if what Tony is saying is correct, it sounds like David Miscavige was very involved in the direction that the legal team took for Danny Masterson's case, which, if you look at it from the perspective of Scientology wanting to protect itself, that could make a lot of sense, right? Because we're talking about Danny Masterson, who is very high in the Scientology hierarchy. He's also very visible for the Church of Scientology as someone in Hollywood, as someone who people know very publicly is a Scientologist. And so, the possibility of corruption here is very high, right? There is at least theoretically, right? So there is a possibility that someone who's at the top there, who has every interest in their organization, coming out smelling a little bit better, maybe not like roses, but maybe better than a turd on the bed, is going to have an interest in wanting to see if there's anything they can do to help, right? Help meaning like coming from their own perspective, like they think that they're helping. Now, coming from an attorney's background perspective, I will say that if I were on the legal team, I would not want this interference from another individual who's trying to protect an organization that could interfere with the ability to actually work on behalf of the actual client, right? That can create some divergencies, some sort of conflicts of interest, so to speak. So anyway, so it sounds like according to what Tony was saying, that he probably was very, very well involved. And that's an interesting point to make here, is that, if they are hypersensitive to the fact that Leah Remini has this series of tweets that she came out with the other day. One person, right? This is one person that has talked about it, and yes, of course, it did get a lot of traction on Twitter, as you can see, right? We went through the likes, the quote tweets, the retweets, all the I mean, we didn't go through the comments, but there were a lot of them there. So there's a you know that's something that is definitely getting some amount of traction out there in the public. Um, would the attorneys themselves be tracking that? Maybe. That's always a possibility. We know from the Depp trial, from the Rittenhouse trial, and then other trials that have been live streamed on YouTube, whether it was on my channel or on someone else's channel. We have seen the legal team, or either the legal team or someone else who is related to one of the parties, kind of make their way out of the woodwork, and contact folks on YouTube or elsewhere, or Twitter or what have you, and make a connection with these folks, because this can become a part of the information warfare in these cases in the court of public opinion, right? This is very, very real, right? Because the way that the public picks up on a certain case, the way that the public reacts to a certain case, can have an impact, in not necessarily in the court of law, but in the real life situation of the parties involved in the case, right? So it's a very interesting thing to see when folks that are involved in these cases, very closely involved in these cases, start to reach out to folks on social media that are talking about these cases, that are analyzing these cases, and then want to see if there's like information that they can put out there, that influencers or other people in these spaces would like to have, to be able to talk about. um so the possibility of these attorneys on their own, or their law firms, or having somebody back at the office that is paying attention to what people are saying about these cases, is definitely there. Like, I would say there's a non-zero chance that that these various firms have someone who's paying attention to social media and what people are saying. So, and especially someone like Leah Remini, she's a voice out there that is very well known, having to do with saying negative things about Scientology. Now, with that said, um, it is kind of funny to think that it is funny to think that if David Miscavige did influence that objection, right? Now, in response to that, like, because of that was a very interesting thing to see coming out of Tony Ortega's video. It made me want to go and look for Leah Remini's tweets, where I might not have necessarily otherwise seen them. And now we just went through them. So if anything, what if anything? Sorry, guys. But like, if anything, what was the result of that objection? Arguably more amplification of those tweets. So if someone is very concerned about those tweets having an impact on the public, talking about it through an objection is probably not the right thing to do, because then that just increases the interest in it on the internet. Am I right? Am I right, or am I right? Okay, anyway, let's continue on. I just thought that was a very interesting sort of like thought out of all of that.
It just seemed pretty ridiculous way to start the day, but it also made it kind of fun. So we had a new witness today, the third of the three victims, Jane Doe 2. And like Jane Doe 1, this is somebody that did not date Masterson. This was not a girlfriend like with Jane Doe 3. She knew him socially. She was a Scientologist. She saw him at Scientology events. They were in kind of the same Hollywood group. She was an actress who had been on a network show, and she had seen him socially around. And then her roommate, she was staying with somebody temporarily, Ilaria Urbanati, who I believe is a fashion designer, right? Scientologist, had asked her to come to a bar to meet with Danny, and Danny was there with Luke Watson, the ever-present Luke Watson. And she said Danny was just laser focused on her, staring at her. And at the end of the evening said, "Give me your number." And she thought it was kind of aggressive and weird, but she thought maybe that's how he flirts. And so she gave him her number. And then,
which I can see that maybe it's just like, oh, this guy's just really forward, or maybe he's socially a little bit different, but hey, maybe he's interesting. I don't know. I can kind of understand that logic.
After that, he started texting her in a real tone 40 way, if you know that Scientology term. "You're coming over, you're bringing a bathing suit, you're getting in the pool." And she thought it was ridiculous and aggressive and obnoxious, but she kind of assumed maybe that's what he thinks flirting is. So she agreed to go over, but she said that she really laid down some guidelines. She'll have a drink, she's not bringing a bathing suit, she's not getting in the pool, and she said it was very clear what she was saying, that they're not going to have sex. So she got over there, and he immediately handed her a big glass of red wine and said, "Drink it, finish it, drink it."
Ugh.
Again with the tone 40 thing. And she's like, well,
which again, I mean, all of this testimony is being evaluated by the jury as to how she comes across. Does she seem like she's being kind of shady with the way that she describes things, or does she present herself in a way that seems sincere and seems accurate and all that kind of stuff? So, but assuming that the jury does find her to be credible, this is a situation where someone is being very, very clear about their boundaries, right? So if those boundaries are then crossed, they have very clearly verbalized what they do not want to have, where their consent ends, right? So blowing past that is very clear as to what that is, right? Yeah, Laura Cox, red flag. 100%, right? That big a mega pint of wine, if you will. I don't like using that in this context, right? Because I feel like a mega pint should be a happy, joyous occasion, but this feels very sinister the way that it's being described. And also, Rosie, yeah, the Barbara Streisand effect. That's essentially what I was talking about with the Leah Remini tweets, right? By trying to force it into a smaller box, you end up just expanding it even further, and then you've got more people interested in it. Yeah. But yes, the Streisand effect for sure. Okay, so let's continue with what's going on here with this glass of wine, where he's basically just putting it in front of her and forcefully saying, drink it, finish it, finish it, finish it. It does. I mean, this is also what Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 3 have also described as part of the process for their experience as well. And so this is a connection point where this kind of starts to sound like this is his MO. This is his modus operandi, right? This is something that he typically does in order to have his way with women against their consent. And I think that for me personally, this is a critical point that has to be consistent for these individual women over time, right? He's talked about before with the other Jane Does, with their various reports that they have made over time, and the defense is trying to poke holes in the consistencies, right? Trying to show inconsistencies. Like Jane Doe 3 talked about how, I think it was Jane Doe 3. I hope I'm not mixing them up, but one of them had talked about how he pulled a gun, or maybe it was Jane Doe 1. Oh gosh, I'm totally mixing this up, I think. But anyway, how he had allegedly pulled a gun on her to keep her silent, to keep her there, because there was somebody else outside in the hallway, because there were other people there. There was a party or something like that. And so there's this question about who she told about the gun and who she didn't. She didn't tell the police, but she told Scientology, I think. And then she also told other people. And so, other than that first report to the police, I believe, she has otherwise said that there was a gun pulled. But that first time she didn't. She's got her reasons for why she didn't tell the police about that. And, whether that's convincing again is up to the jury. But that for me is a little bit less of an important detail as something like this. The wine, the one glass of wine that all of a sudden they lose consciousness. That's a big point, because that shows consistency across individuals. And the reason why that's important here is because these women are accused of colluding together, of basically coming together and concocting a story, but where their stories were told to other individuals before they even met one another, and those stories are overall consistent across the board, through that time period, since like before and after they met and started to talk to one another, then that collusion theory just crumbles. It just falls apart, right? Because you have evidence of them telling the story to someone before they even met the people. So how can they have colluded if they already had the story before they met them? So anyway, that's why that to me is important. Let me get another super chat here. Shibaka Wookie, I love that name. Thanks so much for the super chat. It says a few years ago, 4 male uni students created a nail polish that can detect drugs and drinks to fight abuse at college parties. It should be available soon. I remember hearing about that. That is a fantastic product, and I really hope that does get made available. But I remember reading about it, and I didn't know that it still wasn't ready yet. But I hope it is soon, and I hope it is effective. I also hope that women that use that polish also don't use that as a way to sort of let their guard down in situations where they should have their guard up. So to speak, like don't throw caution to the wind just because you have that and you're relying on that, because what if that fails, right? That's my concern. It's like, that's my lawyer brain going to like worst case situation, like oh god, like what if? But overall, I love the idea of that, and I love the fact that people are actually working on that product, and I really hope that it is effective. And Shibaka Wookie said that the name of the polish is Undercover Colors. I think that is so fantastic. I love that. Okay.
Beautiful house on Hollymont, right? Can you show me around? Can I get a tour? Drink the wine.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to give her a tour. He just wanted her to drink it, which is kind of ominous because like 15 or 20 minutes later, she said suddenly she felt very strange, very heavy drunk, very disorienting, just like the other two women.
Yeah.
Right. So he gets her. He does get her into the jacuzzi. He gets her into the shower, and then he gets her into his bed.
I mean, if she didn't bring her bathing suit, there's how did he get her into the jacuzzi? There's only a couple ways for that to happen, right?
And she said she was just following his directions, and she was a little worried that things were going to get out of control, and she was going along with things hoping that it would keep him calm. And then she described this brutal rape where they had been making out, and she had been kind of making sure that certain boundaries were being watched. And then suddenly he had just said, that's it. Flipped her over on her.
Oh, and massive trigger warning here for folks that are this is going to be probably tough for some people to listen to. So sorry, I should have paused it like even a few seconds before. But just want to put that out there. Trigger warning.
Her hands and knees, and just started raping her from behind. And she was yelling at him, no, Danny, no, I don't want this. She had told him we're not going to have sex. This is not what I want. She was really, really adamant that she had said no many times, and he had ignored her and just thrust. And she described him like a jackhammer, and she described herself like a rag doll.
Oh God,
and let me tell you, of the 3 weeks so far, I have to say this was some of the most graphic, most harrowing testimony we have heard yet. It was awful.
So once again, want to point out, if you are new in here, you missed the discussion earlier. I have pinned in the chat a link to the RAIN organization to help for people that are in abusive situations, to help for people that need help in these kinds of situations. If that is you, please do reach out, get help. RAIN organization is one of those. Link, like I said, is in the pinned comment in the chat. And if you're watching on replay, I will hopefully have remembered to put that also in the description. So just want to make that point out there. If this is you and you are struggling because of a similar situation that is that you have been through, please, please, please do reach out for some help, because you are valuable, you are valued, you are needed in this world as a light to this world. So want to make that clear.
And then, what's interesting with her is she describes how right away she was trying to process what had happened. And she kept trying to sort of recategorize what had happened, because she knew that she'd been raped, but she couldn't think of it that way because she was a Scientologist. She'd apparently been through this before. She described how a previous boyfriend had sexually assaulted her, a Scientologist. She had gone with him to the church to try to get something done about it. And she had run into the same thing that Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 3 had, that there is no rape in Scientology. You're a victim, you caused it yourself. So
and this is also what Leah talked about in her tweets that we went through earlier. So yeah,
she knew she wasn't even going to attempt to take this about Danny Masterson to the church, not only because of that previous incident, but also because of who Danny was. And I thought Deputy DA Mueller really carefully set up this next section where he was anticipating what the defense was going to say, went over her with the post-incident contacts with Danny. And I thought,
and this is really, really important in in any case, but in a case like this where you know that you are putting an alleged victim on the stand, and you know that they're going to be going through cross-examination, any kind of vulnerabilities, you want to go through those on direct to the extent that you possibly can, because that way you can reframe them in a way that is as sympathetic to your case as possible. So it's important that Mueller did that, to go through these other things, this other contact that she had with Danny Masterson afterwards.
She had an interesting way of describing it. She really couldn't think of it as rape because it was too terrifying for her and what it would mean for her and her life.
And that's a reasonable explanation too, right? I think that even people who haven't been through a situation like that can empathize with that, right? To say, I can understand that once you put a certain label on something, it makes it like official, right? It makes the thing you've been through official, which means you've it's almost like you have to think of it in a certain way. It makes it more real. It makes it more prescient in your life. And so psychologically, I can understand someone's reluctance to think of it as that because of those reasons, because then it's like, oh, it's at the forefront, and you are someone who has gone through these kinds of things. You never want to think of yourself as somebody who would fall into a situation like that. But then when it does happen to you, I can understand having that reluctance for, like I said, for those reasons.
So I thought that was well done. Then we heard from Jane Doe 2 a little bit more about Detective Reyes. Now, I've said to you before that with both Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 3, there was some.
And also, sorry guys, I'm sorry I keep interrupting this, but I do see in the chat we've got some folks talking about the transcript. So I am linking to one of them. Okay, so his Substack is, it's in order to get access to a Substack, I think you have to join the community, but you don't have to pay for it. None of these are behind a paywall. So he's got, I think each day he ends up doing like 3 or 4 of these, because every time there's a break in the proceedings, he uploads it because he's just typing away through the whole thing. So there's the morning session. The second one is where he gets into all of these graphic details. So just so you guys know, if anyone is interested, be sure to go and check it out. He really does a great job of giving so much detail there.
Hints about the problematic investigation with Detective Reyes. And if you remember all the way back to my original story in March 2017, when I first broke this story, I reported how these women were angry about how the investigation was going. And I even quoted from a letter from Jane Doe 3 to the chief of LAPD complaining about how bad it was. So we've heard some indirect things that maybe there was a problem with Reyes. Well, today, Jane Doe 2 was a lot more direct about it. She said she was being very shady. She said she was possibly corrupt. She said she was inappropriate about the way she spoke to her. And she gave some details, and check my notes. Let me know what you think, because it did seem really pretty inappropriate what the detective was saying to her and how she was treating her. So Jane Doe 2 is the first one to really overtly said that they were very concerned about Detective Reyes. And in fact, see, they have asked, the defense has brought up this idea of collusion and cross-pollination.
Right.
But Jane Doe 2 explained the reason why she and the other victims were talking together is they were concerned that the LAPD was corrupt. Who else were they going to talk about that with than each other? So I thought that was interesting.
That's another interesting detail,
So,
I will say, because that's another thing that can potentially undercut that theory by the defense, saying that they are colluding. If they say, look, the only reason why we were even talking to each other is because this investigator did such a terrible job of actually putting this case together. I can definitely understand that. I still do think that the more compelling thing to look at, though, is the fact that they have their reports that they have made to Scientology, to the police, to friends, to all these individuals, ahead of actually meeting one another. So that's going to be the most solid evidence that really undercuts this collusion theory.
So, then it was time for the cross-examination. And, Cohen this time...
And this is going to be, I've said this before about the other alleged victims. These can be very difficult cross-examinations to do, because you can either go very hard against someone, and with a theory that you are making everything up and how dare you. That's basically like what Kevin Spacey's legal team, I think, did against Anthony Rapp. Is they took a very hard line from the very beginning through their opening statement, and then also cross-examining Anthony Rapp, cross-examining the expert witness, talking about his PTSD, all that kind of stuff. So you can do that, or you can take a much softer approach, which is, just keeping things very factual. That is usually going to be my recommendation in a case like that, is just to say, like, look, you've got a lot of emotions. You say that these things have happened. You might have a sincere belief that something happened to you, but it wasn't my guy. Like that's a way that you could go about it. Obviously, whether or not that specific theory works depends on the circumstances of your case. But the problem with going too hard against an alleged victim in a case like this on cross-examination is it can completely blow up in your face, and that the jury might then see you as victimizing this person all over again by just completely charging through them and running over them and steamrolling them and doing all these terrible things, while they are already A, have gone through something horrible, B, have gone through something horrible again because they've had to recount it, and C, are now going through something horrible again because they are having to face pressure for it. So these kind of cross-examinations can go in a lot of different ways depending on the strategy that you take. And I will also say, I am a little bit surprised that they had their male attorney cross-examining her. Karen Goldstein is also one of the defense attorneys. So she has the ability to ostensibly to cross-examine some witnesses. And it sounds like so far, Philip Cohen has been the one who's been cross-examining all of the alleged victims. And that can play in a certain kind of way as well. So yeah, I'm a little bit surprised, to be honest. I think that sometimes that can be even more sensitive to a jury if they feel like a man that is cross-examining a female alleged victim, that the jury can see that as them being even more aggressive just because it's a man that is cross-examining.
He had less to work with because, Jane Doe 1's statements go all the way back, over a period of 19 years. Jane Doe 3 had some things she'd said a few more times. Jane Doe 2 had fewer interviews that he could work with, but he was trying the same thing about things that she had said to Detective Reyes. I got to tell you, even though Jane Doe 2's testimony was some of the most harrowing and graphic and awful, these questions were even less effective than they were on the other two. For example, let me give you an example. Cohen says to Jane Doe 2, now, did you describe to Detective Reyes that you had talked to the other women about our investigation? Oh no, I said the investigation. Are you sure you didn't say our? I remember thinking to myself, wait a minute, that's it? You're trying to make it look like she's lying or something because she referred to this case with two other women being raped by the same man, our investigation? That's the level of gotcha in today. I mean, it was so minor, and it was over.
Yikes. Then I if her testimony was as gruesome as Tony says it is, and as you know, as others have indicated from the transcripts that they read from Tony's Substack, it's that's a tough thing for the defense to overcome if their cross-examination wasn't able to really poke any holes. Because I mean, you can, you know, like I said, the defense, they've got to work with what they've got, right? So they've got to try to cross-examine whether they feel like they can. But I mean, yeah, if that is the extent of the cross-examination, to say, you know, my investigation versus our investigation, that seems to imply a certain sense of collusion, you know, with these other women. That is not going to be enough to stick if you have, like I said, like I was just talking about, the evidence of these women, you know, making these reports before meeting these other women, where those reports are relatively consistent overall on the most important points with what they're saying today.
I mean, Jane Doe 2 was completed today. Think of how many days we had, you know, Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 3 on the stand.
Yeah, so it sounds like yesterday was a bad day for Danny Masterson and a good day for the prosecution. If her testimony was that gruesome and that effective, and that the cross-examination couldn't really land any points on her cross-examination, yeah, that's a big day in influencing the jury, I think.
Now, I made a little joke about Cohen. You might have picked it up today. His sartorial splendor was really quite something.
It's a good phrase, by the way. Sartorial splendor. I and you know, he's a writer, right? He's a journalist, so of course he's going to have some good phrases that he uses. But I when I heard that, I was like, that is a fantastic phrase, sartorial splendor. I really want to use that at some point. And by the way, Kate Elisa, thanks so much for gifting out 10 more Legalbytes memberships. That is so kind, so generous of you. I know you've done it before, and I really appreciate you doing that again. So I see a bunch of folks that are coming in that are now YouTube members. So to all of you guys, welcome to Bite Club. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope you guys can make it tomorrow for our Bite Club exclusive like members only live stream, where it's just a casual Friday where we are hanging out, we're talking about stuff, not necessarily even law. Sometimes I should say usually, we go over, you know, memes or clips or funny stuff to go over as well, and we just kind of hang out and sort of roll our way into the weekend. So I hope you guys are able to join us for that, and yeah, otherwise I welcome to Bike Club.
He had a gray suit, but he had a white and green polka dot shirt and an orange and black polka dot tie.
Which is an interesting color scheme, right? Polka dot, green and white, and then with an orange tie. I tried to look for images of the outfit, and I couldn't find any photos, but I was very curious about it when he pointed this out.
And a handkerchief that matched the shirt. Stylish. Now, I might have compared him to Tom Hanks' character, David S. Pumpkins from Saturday Night Live, but it was in a really, you know, admirable way. I mean, I think the guy's taste in clothes is great.
Do you guys believe that? Do you think that he likes Philip Cohen's taste in clothes? I don't know. I don't know if I believe Tony on that, but it's even if he doesn't, like, that's such a minor thing to poke some fun out. We talk about courtroom fashion on this channel as well. We talked about it quite a bit during the Depp v. Heard case, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about, actually, because I'm basic. I've got my pumpkin spice lattes, I've got my UGG boots, I've got my puppies and kittens, and I love talking about courtroom fashion. So this to me was kind of funny when he goes into it, because yeah, that's not exactly something that I would expect to see in a high profile trial with that kind of a combination. And again, I wish I could have found a photo of it. Maybe someone else is better at researching or Googling these things, and they can investigate and find a photo, because I am very curious to see how this looked. Maybe you pulled it off well, right? Maybe it's a very fall kind of look. Or maybe it looks a little clownish. But the image that I have in my head, of the outfit is is a little kooky.
I just couldn't resist it. I mean, David S. Pumpkins just made his second appearance on Saturday Night Live anyway. If you don't know who that is, it's okay.
Well, if you don't know who that is, here's an opportunity for levity, guys. we're gonna watch a little bit of that the appearance of Tom Hanks as David S. Pumpkins here. It's just gonna be a short little clip here, because it's just, why not, right? 'Tis the season. We are at we're past Halloween, but we've got the blending season right now, right? It's the first week of November, which means it's Nightmare Before Christmas season. Is it Halloween? Is it Christmas? I don't know. We're gonna blend it together. We'll figure it out. Okay, let's watch a little bit here. So this is, of course, for all the folks that are not familiar with who this character is. You are about to become familiar with it. This is from Saturday Night Live, which I've gotten questions from folks. I know we've got an international audience here too. SNL, or Saturday Night Live, is a comedy sketch TV show that appears on NBC on Saturday nights. Whether it's funny or not is up to the eye of the beholder, but this is a character that I have always found to be very funny, because it's just so kooky and weird, and like, it's Tom Hanks being such a total goofball. Okay, let's go on.
And welcome to cell block 666, right this way.
Oh my God, I'm already scared.
You are about to embark on a terrifying tour of this petrifying prison, where each cell holds iconic frights from the Silver Scream. Let the tour begin. We are approaching our first stop. Time to meet the sin mates. Open cell 600.
I do chuckle with the cheesy humor. I will say that.
Yo, Michael Myers just made me low-key jump. This ride's awesome.
Only time will tell. The next cell is upon us. Open cell 661.
My name is Annabelle. Can you play with me?
No, I hate Annabelle. I can't with that little bitch.
Yo, I really might pass out for real. Have your phones ready.
You'll never be ready for the horror that you'll find in cell 662.
So here it is.
I'm David Pumpkins, and I'm gonna scare you stupid.
It's obviously very ridiculous.
Any questions? Are you shaking in your boots?
No. I've seen like every horror movie ever, and none of them had David Pumpkins in it.
True, but I was kind of feeling David Pumpkins though. Nice change of pace.
Silence!
Okay, so that's about it. Okay, we can definitely get back to what we were talking about here. But I wanted to share that because I thought that was a kind of a silly little reference that he made. Although it's not exactly the description. You could see the outfit that Tom Hanks has. It's a black blazer kind of suit with a bunch of orange pumpkins on it, but it does kind of seem evocative of like similarly what Tony Ortega is describing here as Philip Cohen's Philip Cohen's sartorial, how did he describe it again? Sartorial something or other. Sartorial splendor. God, I need to remember that phrase. It's such a good one. Okay. Alrighty. Let's continue with this video.
But no, it just wasn't very effective. In fact, what I remember is last year at the preliminary hearing, Tom Mesereau really, was more effective at asking Jane Doe 2 about her thoughts afterwards, and this idea of recategorizing the event. Mesereau really bored into that in a way that I think got her kind of flustered. There was none of that today. I mean, it was done. And it's not just me. I polled some other reporters, and we were all looking at each other saying, that was Cross? That was it? Really strange. But the strangest thing was at the very end of the day. Judge Olmedo dismissed the jurors, and unlike some other breaks where they go back into the jury room, now they're going to walk across the gallery and right between me and the Masterson family. Right past me, and we stand up. Judge Olmedo has said, reporters, you don't have to stand up, but I usually do, not always. Today I stood up. I was standing there. I look over. Bijou has turned around and is staring at my face.
Oh no.
I look slightly to my right, and there's this guy that's part of the family, Masterson crew. He wasn't in the family section today. I don't know who he is. Middle-aged man, kind of a fleshy face. He's laser focused on me. And I looked, I'm like, wow. I mean, they're both just, and I realized what they were doing was they were trying to see if I was giving any winks or visual cues or anything, communicating in some way to the jurors. I have no doubt that's what they were doing. Because remember what happened to Borthwick last week, right?
There was an attorney.
They're shill.
So for anybody that didn't see the last live stream talking about it, there was an attorney in the courtroom who got specifically called out twice by the judge for making faces during testimony, kind of like laughing and making faces during alleged victim testimony, nonetheless. And so the second time, the judge sort of interrupted proceedings, which the second time I think wasn't happening during testimony, but it was happening in the middle of sort of discussion between the attorneys on both sides. So the judge actually called him out and made him state his name on the record. So it turns out he's a Laguna Beach attorney. He has worked with the attorneys who are representing Masterson in this case. He's worked on other cases and stuff. So that's what he's referring to.
Defense attorney Schill in the audience got booted. I'm sure they'd love to get me booted. They'd probably love to complain, or Ortega's like winking at the jurors or making inappropriate faces. I mean, at the most, people are walking by me and I'm just like, so I made sure and looked away so they had nothing to complain about. But that was an interesting moment. At one point, I looked back at Bijou. She kind of gave me that. That's all they have, people. They're down to trying to get a reporter kicked out. That's it. Their defense attorney was so ineffective today. Danny, it's not looking good, man. That's 3 witnesses done. We're going to have some more corroborating witnesses. I heard today we could possibly wrap up the prosecution case a week from tomorrow. So,
okay.
I don't know, people. This cross-examination stuff is not going well. But Jane Doe 2, she held her own. And I, check the notes that I sent out. I think you'll see these women, they're brave. They are really brave women for doing this. So that's my report for today. Again, for our folks on YouTube, if you're seeing this on YouTube, you're a day behind, please join us. Sign up for free emails at tonyortega.substack.com. You'll get my reports directly from the courtroom. I sent out 4 of them today. with every detail that happened.
Yep.
Whew, these long days.
He definitely has a
We're
lot of
getting there.
detail in
We're
these.
getting there, people.
So yeah.
And this is your proprietor from the Clara Shortridge Foltz Criminal Justice Center in Los Angeles. Signing out.
All right. So, oops, sorry. Didn't mean to restart that. So, okay. That is that. Definitely follow him on Substack if you are interested in this. And I will, once again, I will link to the morning session. The reason why I'm not pinning it is because I prefer to keep the RAIN organization link pinned at the top of the chat. So, yeah. So anyway, so that's, I've got it in the chat right now. His Substack, starting with the morning session from day 13. So if you are interested in reading all of that, follow that link. It should get you there. And you'll get all of these details. He is very, very, very detailed in his writing for these transcripts of everything that happens. It's a great thing that the LA County court is allowing them to bring in computers, because that wasn't available in Fairfax, Virginia for the Deputy Heard case. So no one was allowed to bring any kind of like electronics. I mean, other than their cell phones, but those had to be kept off because they didn't want people recording anything. So they have a bit more trust, I suppose, in the folks that are coming into LA County court. But okay, and there's a question in the chat. What is Substack? So that is Substack is a platform for basically for independent journalism. So folks can start an account and they can just start writing all kinds of things. And so you can follow someone on their Substack. You can also support them by paying for a monthly or annual sort of program, and you get access to more of their writings, more of their stuff. It's a good way to support independent journalism. And so that's one of the ways that Tony Ortega is able to do what he does. He has been following Scientology for years and years and decades, and he largely talks about Scientology. I think he also writes about other stuff, but a lot of what he's known for is talking about Scientology. So that's one of the ways that he supports himself, because if you have an understanding of the practice of fair game and suppressive persons and all that kind of stuff, he is definitely considered somebody who is a suppressive person, right? He talks a lot about Scientology, and generally speaking, when somebody talks publicly about Scientology, it usually is in the context of Scientology is bad. So that's him, and that's probably why Bijou Phillips and the other individual, I can't remember the name that he threw out there, but why they were probably staring daggers at him at the end of that day in court. So I would imagine that he probably gets heat from time to time from these individuals. But anyway, so Substack is where he's put all of his stuff. He calls it the underground bunker. That's what he calls his community or his page or what have you. And so anyway, so you're able to go see all of his writings there. You don't need to pay for it in order to see his stuff about the trial, but if you want access to everything, then he's got some paid programs for that. Not unlike having like a Patreon or something like that, how you can support creators through Patreon or Locals or all these other places, or YouTube memberships, right? You can often get access to extra stuff with that. But same thing with Substack. It's just for writers and for journalists, essentially. So anyway, check out his stuff. He's doing a phenomenal job of getting a lot of detail out there for folks that otherwise wouldn't be able to have access to it, because as we know, journalists that work for like the corporate press, the mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, they don't always give all of the details or all of the relevant details, or sometimes they frame things in weird ways. And so far I have found, I mean, obviously I'm not there to compare what happens in the courtroom to what he's writing, but he's got so much detail in there. It really does seem like he's actually just literally transcribing things that he sees. There can't be enough time for him to be able to edit this stuff before he releases it. So anyway, check it out if you are interested. And otherwise, thank you so much for being here. I hope you have found this interesting or informative. Thanks so much to everybody in the chat. I've seen several mods today. I really appreciate all of you guys for helping to foster this community and usher the communication or the discussion in the chat to make it positive. And and warm and welcoming and engaging and all that kind of stuff. And I really appreciate that, because you guys know we always respect disagreement, especially when it comes from a well, not necessarily a well-reasoned, but from some kind of reasoned perspective, right? With good faith arguments coming from a different perspective is absolutely appropriate, absolutely welcome in this chat always, and in this community, so long as you do so in a respectful way, that is actually making some sort of an effort to get to the truth with a capital T, as I like to call it. So thank you to everybody in the chat for doing that. And thank you to everybody for being so supportive on a day like today, where we are talking about some heavy stuff, some triggering stuff. And I know that is difficult for many of us. And I'm seeing the support that you guys have, that you guys are giving one another, and I absolutely love it. So I will end on a note that I like to end on when we've got this kind of topic, with the idea that we want to not just allow this kind of stuff to sort of take over the world. And if you feel like you are feeling like you have some diminished sense of control in this world because of these awful things that we're talking about, do just one good thing for someone else that ideally cannot be repaid, or do one thing to make someone else's day. Call someone that you haven't talked to in a while. Call a loved one and tell them that you love them and you appreciate them, even if you haven't seen them for a while or you haven't talked to them for a while. One thing today is a good way of bringing just a little bit of light into this world again, and trying to shift the balance again back to the good in the world, because there is absolutely good in this world. And we talk about the darkness quite a bit, but don't forget that there is quite a bit of good light as well. All right. With that, thank you so much to everybody. And if you're not a Bite Club member, I'm so happy to have you here as well for all of these live streams, for all these discussions, for the VODs that we put up. Absolutely appreciate your time and attention and focus, because I know that there's a lot of stuff competing for it these days. And to the folks that will be able to make it for tomorrow's Bite Club member stream, I hope to see you there, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your Thursday regardless. And I'll see you guys in the next video.